Okay, we're going to go on to the second section. The second section of the legislation would be the purpose. So, what's the purpose of having legislation? Well, we set up 5 subcommittees, and each of those subcommittees looked at the purpose of the legislation from the topic area that we gave them. So here are the 5 topic areas that people thought about. Accessible information and communication. So we want to make sure that people have access to information in sign language, in Braille, large print, whatever medium people need to be able to understand information that's being given out by businesses, by government. Attitudes and public awareness. We know that we need people to be educated and to become aware about what this legislation is about. So we're going to need to do a lot of education and awareness. Client service and public transportation. Employment and the built environment. And that means, well, I'll get into that in a minute, what the built environment means. So I'm going to go through each of these sections, or these topics, and talk a bit about what each of the subcommittees thought was important about what the purpose of this legislation is. So from the perspective of attitudes and public awareness, the subcommittee thought, for our new legislation to be a success, we need the support, commitment, and participation of all Nova Scotians. Everyone has the right to understand what we are doing and why. We need to start a province-wide discussion about accessibility to promote a Nova Scotia that is truly open to all. We will have to clearly communicate how we plan to meet each goal of our new accessibility legislation. We will continue to work with the public as these changes take shape. So for that subcommittee, they felt the purpose of the legislation was to make sure that the information and communication would be accessible to everybody. So when you think about that section, you have to think, well, does that make sense to me, or have we missed something and we need to think about some other thing? The next section was client services and public transportation. All Nova Scotians should be able to travel within the province using our current accessible transportation systems. The new legislation will not govern travel by air, rail, or on ferries between provinces, as these are under the federal government. They're in charge of those. So this legislation won't relate to those areas, but it will relate to transportation within the province that is the responsibility of the province, like Accessibus, things like that. Government services and those funded by government, those groups that get money from government, must be available to all Nova Scotians. So that's what that group thought the purpose of the legislation was. In terms of employment, workplaces in Nova Scotia must be open, inclusive, and accessible. Government can take the lead by ensuring people with disabilities are fairly represented in the public sector. That means government should take the lead in making sure that there's lots of people with disabilities working for the government. Employers must provide the following: equal opportunities for hiring and advancement. That means people need to be able to get hired, and they need to be able to, get promotions and move up in government or in a business. Equal pay for work of equal value. Safe and healthy working conditions. Government can help employers by doing the following: creating employment equity or affirmative action programs. Those are programs that will promote the hiring of people with disabilities. And providing training, job retention, and return to work programs. Both government and the private sector can help people who choose to be self-employed or start their own businesses. So that's what that committee thought the purpose of the legislation should be. The last one is the built environment. So the built environment includes the following things: all buildings, all pedestrian rights of way, such as sidewalks, crosswalks, paths, recreational areas, such as ball fields, pools, and parks, and privately owned homes. All of the above should be open to all Nova Scotians using the principles of universal design, which we talked about earlier, and visitability. And visitability means that when we build homes, that people should be able to get into those homes without any barriers. So you can get in the door, you can get around, there's lots of space to get around, you can get into the bathroom. So those are the concepts of visitability. Homeowners will be encouraged to use universal design and visitability when they're renovating their homes. Government will include universal design and visitability in voluntary standards. That means we won't be saying everybody, you have to do this in your homes. We're saying we want you to volunteer to do this in your home. So that is one of the principles or the purposes that the built environment thinks should be included in the legislation. So again, when you think about those purposes, the idea is for you to think, well, does that make sense? Or are there things that we need to add? Or are there things that we've forgotten?